Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Alex, for the introduction. I'm super excited to be here chatting with you today. So what inspired me to write The Authentic Organisation? I'm sorry about the really long title there. I know it takes a while for the introduction when you have to say it all, but thank you. Let me tell you about why I've written the book. I want to take you back. So early in my career, I had two very different encounters with psychological safety that literally shaped everything that I do today, and it inspired me to write the book. So let me talk you through what those two experiences were, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. So the first experience I had was, imagine this, right? I'm 22 years old, 4'11" tall. Sadly, I haven't grown very much. And I was working with dangerous criminals. So I was teaching them English and maths in probation officers around West Yorkshire in the UK. Now, as you can imagine, working with ex-offenders, it was an incredibly hostile and nerve-wracking environment. However, my employer took my safety very seriously from the very first day I started working with them. We had protocols, we knew exactly what to do if anything happened. And listen, they had to take my safety seriously because it could have been a matter of life or death with some of the people that I was working with. Now, this became a reality one day when I was stalked by a dangerous man after work one night. So I was walking back to my car after work. It was winter, so it was dark. It was about a 15-minute walk back to my car, and a man started following me. It was a very scary experience. Initially, protocol went out of my head, as it does in those instances. But very quickly, I remembered what to do. I phoned the office. I spoke to them there. They literally put me on speakerphone, had the police on speed dial ready. Like it was pretty frightening, I have to say. The long story short is I managed to get into my car. I saw who the person was. I drove away, reported it, obviously, and my employer made sure that I was protected and I was really well looked after. Now it continued for a few weeks, so it took a while for them to kind of get things moving and to make sure that everything was safe. The man ended up going back to prison, but I was physically, mentally and psychologically safe the whole time. Every single day was brilliant. So that experience showed me just how crucial a safe work environment is, and communication actually with others. So that was the first experience. I was totally safe. Right. Now, a couple of years later, I decided to move on. As you can imagine, working in that environment as a young person is quite taxing after a while. So I decided to move into something a bit more sedate, I guess. So I moved into teaching adults for a college. Completely different story, as you can imagine. However, it was totally the opposite, right? I did not feel safe bringing my authentic self to work. I wasn't out in the workplace. I didn't tell people about my sexuality at the time. Now, my manager she was a dictator. I guess you could call her a dictator, right? So she was controlling, she was manipulative, she was abusive. And she found out that I was gay one day. And literally from that point onwards, she bullied me because of my sexuality. Unfortunately, I didn't feel safe enough to speak up. This was around, maybe 17 to 18 years ago now. So it was a different climate back then. However, college environment, homophobia, biphobia, it was rife. You know, it wasn't okay to be out in the workplace back then. In that environment. So long story short, I didn't feel safe to report it because I didn't want to out myself to everybody at work. I didn't want everybody to know. Finally, when I did speak up, my manager was promoted and I was told not to progress the case any further because it would highlight my sexual orientation to my colleagues. It was very frustrating. But that's when I knew that I had to leave to create something better. And I started the Psychological Safety Institute. So I've spent the last 14 years helping organisations build workplaces where people can truly thrive. And it's all based on those experiences that I've had back in the workplace in those early days. So I wrote the book for a few different reasons. The first is to make sure that no one else has to experience what I did. I would never want anybody to experience that. The second is I want to bust this myth that psychological safety is just about speaking up or making mistakes. There's so much more to it than that. So I'm really keen to dispel that myth. The third is I'm constantly asked by organizations how to create a psychologically safe workplace. And how do we fix toxic workplace cultures? So this book is my way of sharing practical, actionable steps based on the methodology that we've developed at the Institute. And then finally, last thing is I want to challenge and change outdated workplace attitudes and cultures, because I believe everyone has the right to feel safe at work. So long story, that's what motivated me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this really interesting story and background. I mean, we hear a lot about psychological safety also in the DE&I discourse, and you just said it, that you want to destroy this myth that it's only about, speaking up and, being safe without fear of retribution. But you said there's a lot more to psychological safety than these two aspects. Can you tell us a bit more what you deem crucial for psychological safety?
Yeah, absolutely right. So let's start there. Okay, so there is this misconception that psychological safety is all about the belief that teams can take risks. So you might hear these terms, interpersonal risk taking. We hear that it's about making mistakes, speaking up, expressing your opinions. And you mentioned a crucial bit there, without fear of judgment or retribution of any kind. So yeah, I believe psychological safety is a much bigger concept than that, with a wider scope that often goes unnoticed or is downplayed actually as well. So psychological safety is multidimensional in nature. So actually, it's quite a complex aspect of workplace culture when you think about it. Let me tell you how we define psychological safety at the Institute and maybe talk a little bit around that. So we define psychological safety as an individual subjective experience of safety, comfort, and confidence within a specific context. So it refers to like how safe and at ease you feel in different situations and different settings. So that might be a physical space, an environment, it might be a situation, or when interacting with certain people. In other words, psychological safety is the confidence and comfort to express your authentic self and then engage openly with other people. So basically what you're trying to do is create an environment where individuals and teams can thrive even in those challenging situations that come up. But you might be thinking, okay, that's quite theoretical. What does it mean in practice? Like what can we expect from that? And if it isn't just about this interpersonal communication, then what else is it? So let me talk to you a little bit about that. I think it's really crucial that we understand what it is. So I see it covering 5 key areas within an organization, which align with our 5 key culture levels. And I can go into more detail on these in a little while, but let's stay focused on psychological safety for a moment. Okay. Yeah. So psychological safety involves self-awareness, personal responsibility, bringing your authentic self to work. And it's about knowing what affects your performance and behavior at work and how to effectively manage your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors that affect your performance. It then extends beyond the self to cover those one-to-one interactions we have, so that interpersonal communication. So that does come into it. So I'm talking about the sending and receiving of messages and the conversational aspect of communication. So that's the stuff like, how do you handle conflict? How do you navigate a conversation? It's that kind of stuff. It also extends beyond these one-to-one interactions to include team interactions. So that includes team dynamics, collaboration, creating safe spaces, etc. It also extends beyond the team to cover interdepartmental elements. So how we work across the organization. So imagine that you're working, for example, with other teams or other departments. It's that. How do you work well together? And it also extends to the organizational level. So this covers aspects such as your values, your norms, leadership practices, policies, procedures, inclusion and belonging, all of that kind of stuff. So in short, there are 5 key levels to remember here, and it starts with you. Then we have one-to-one interactions, team level, interdepartmental level, and then finally, organizational level. And I always say, and I'll say this a lot today, I'm warning you now, Alex, you might get sick of me saying it, right? But psychological safety starts with individuals, okay? And self-awareness is key. Let's just address one last thing before we move on, right? So why is it important, right? You might be thinking, psychological safety, I've heard it a lot. Didn't really know what it is. Thanks for that explanation. But why is it important? Well, it's simple. people leave organizations when they don't feel safe. We know that. But also, everyone has the right to feel safe at work. That's it. It's as simple as that. That's why it's important.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. So when you say it starts with the individual, so whose responsibility is it to create a psychologically safe workplace?
Yeah, I'm glad you've asked that one, because quite often when I'm working with organizations, the first thing that they say is they think it's the leadership team's responsibility. I often hear people say that, but it isn't true. Okay, so psychological safety is the responsibility of every single person in the organization, because organizations are made up of people, right? Very simple. So I developed what we call the hierarchy of psychological safety, which sets out 8 critical organizational responsibilities to cultivate psychological safety. And I go into detail in it in the book, but very briefly for the purposes of today, it will help us to understand people's responsibilities and what is involved here. So the first 5 levels delve into internal dimensions, so responsibilities, direct responsibilities of the organization. The last 3 levels transcend those organizational boundaries and bring in other people. So I'll very quickly detail the 8 levels to give you an idea of the different levels of responsibility within an organization. So it starts at level 1, individual safety. So this is about establishing a foundational level of psychological safety at the individual level. And that helps to promote authenticity, resilience, and personal responsibility. Always starts at the individual level, right? Then we move on to level 2, which is interpersonal safety. So we're extending this out from me now to I'm having a conversation with you, Alex. How do I create safety within that dynamic, within that one-to-one interaction? So we're looking here at how do individuals communicate? It brings in those interpersonal skills that we've talked about already.
Yeah.
Right, level 3 then is, okay, so me and Alex, we're in a conversation. Now we want to bring in the rest of the team. So how do we create safety now for the whole of the team that's working together? How do we do that? How do we create a safe environment where everyone in that team can thrive? So we have a team level responsibility. Then we have level 4, which is collaboration safety. So this is bringing in those interdepartmental relationships now. So our team might be working with a few other teams across the organization. So when we do that, we then have a responsibility for multiple teams and how they work together. Level 5 is organizational safety. So this is creating that level of safety on an organizational level. So this brings in, like I mentioned before, norms, policies, practices, leadership, that kind of stuff. So they're the 5 direct responsibilities within an organization. But then what happens if you work with other people? So we extend this to level 6, which is external relations safety. So this one brings in those relationships with clients, stakeholders, partner organizations, and it's creating safe spaces with those organizations and the individuals within those organizations. Level 7 is community safety. So now I want you to imagine we're bringing the wider community. And perfect example of this, right? If you imagine Pride events, right? Across the world, loads of organizations go out, attend Pride events. They do stuff within the local community for Pride Month. Perfect example of community safety, building safety within the wider community and promoting psychological safety through initiatives, that kind of stuff. Last level is level 8, industry and global safety. So this is now thinking about industry dynamics and global contexts. So this level is dedicated to challenging and transforming industry and global workplace attitudes. And we're actively working to dismantle any outdated practices, because let's face it, there's a lot of them, right? So the ultimate objective here from all of these levels is to establish a global landscape of workplaces and industries that prioritize and cultivate psychological safety. So yeah, there are 8 levels of responsibility, but ultimately psychological safety starts with you, an individual, because you are responsible for your own safety, and how you behave will affect how safe other people feel around you. Does that make sense?
I mean, that makes absolutely sense also, because it's really good that your approach really covers all the wide range from the I to this societies one is embedded in. So I mean, and this also sounds like a big project, if I may say. So what can can companies expect to see when they really invest in a psychologically safe workplace?
Yeah, great question. Great. Yeah, interesting. You should say that, Alex. I don't take things lightly. I don't do little things, right? Funny. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, good realization. Yeah. So, what can companies expect to see when they have a psychologically safe workplace, right? Okay. Well, I mean, there's tons of different things, but let me talk you through a few. Companies can expect to see significant lasting transformations that not only enhance workplace culture, but also empower their employees and leaders to thrive. So here are a few key outcomes that you can expect when you work with the Institute and our methodology. And I specifically say our methodology because if you only focus on the speak up culture and the interpersonal aspects of psychological safety, you're focusing on just one aspect of psychological safety, right? So you're not going to get the same results. So if you follow our methodology, this is what you can expect. First of all, enhanced leadership effectiveness. So leaders are going to gain the tools to identify and address toxic behaviors, improve team dynamics, and create an environment where everyone feels valued and empowered. The second thing is communication. So with focus on communication skills, we've got to remember, right, in our education system, that we don't receive any sort of training or any sort of expertise or anything around communication and those softer skills that people need in the workplace, right? So they've got to come from somewhere. We need to provide some sort of training or some sort of intervention there on communication skills, because people will not have open and honest conversations. They won't know how to deal with misunderstandings and conflict. They don't really know how to collaborate and give feedback effectively unless they work on it and somebody talks to them about how to do it, right? So improved communication, when you do it right, that would be a big outcome. The third is reduced toxic behaviors. So you're going to identify and dismantle any toxic behaviors and practices at their root level. So we're going to get rid of those negative interactions, create a healthier workplace culture. You're going to improve emotional intelligence, because when employees develop greater self-awareness and empathy, they're then able to navigate those diverse personality styles and types within a team. And they're going to be able to navigate different work styles, all of that kind of stuff. So you're enhancing those workplace relationships. Other things are things like empowered conflict resolution, stronger team dynamics, increased resilience, promotion of authenticity, so people feeling like they can bring their authentic self to work. Things like greater accountability and ownership, healthier workloads and work practices. So that really focuses in on things like reducing burnout, improving overall employee well-being, that kind of stuff. Sustainable cultural change is a big one as well. So making sure that you are making changes that are sustainable for a longer term period. Often when we do our work, people will just want to come in and do a quick fix, but this stuff isn't a quick fix. You know, these are sustainable long-term changes that you're going to make that will have a massive impact within the organization and the people that work there.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking about sustainable change, I mean, sustainable, as you just said, it takes a long time, and it takes effort and constant effort to do that. So what are some of the common challenges you encountered in creating psychologically safe workplaces, or that companies face who aim to create these environments?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and I can't go through them all, right? But I'll give you a flavor. Let me give you a flavor. Okay, so most are culture related, right? So typically it's around culture. We tend to have challenges associated with leadership effectiveness, negative behaviors, the kind of stuff that I've mentioned already, really. But those key challenges that I've just said create toxic situations and conflict, and that's one of the biggest things that organizations are coming to us with at the moment. We've also got things around team dynamics and how to leverage these. Ineffective communication is another big one. Now, the approach that organizations typically take, right, is to try to tackle these issues from a superficial approach, right? So they might try to give some training and think that's going to do it. You know, that's going to cure everything. You can't expect a culture change or to eliminate these big issues with a single awareness raising session or training. However much we would like that to happen and you would like that to happen, it just doesn't, right? You need to put in the work. But also you need to start with individuals. And this is where the speak up culture and the interpersonal risk-taking part of it falls down, because everyone is responsible for their own safety. The minute that you start interacting with other people, you affect their safety. And collectively, this affects the organizational level of safety, which then affects your whole organizational culture, right?
Yeah.
But culture isn't just on an organizational level. Whenever we talk about culture, people think it's just one thing within an organization. It's one culture. But there are actually 5 levels of culture within an organization. We've got personal, one-to-one, team, collaboration, and organizational culture. And that aligns with what I've already said earlier. Now, this is the cool thing about culture, what I found cool. Anyway, you might not, but I do. Right? It's fluid, okay? It isn't set in stone. So think about it. You bring a new person into a team, the culture changes, the vibe changes, right? Everyone contributes to the culture. And that's why I keep saying it starts at an individual level. It's so important to remember that.
Yeah. I mean, I totally also always advocate for this fluidity of culture, and also of let's say identities and relational aspects of identities when you speak about the diversity discourse more. But you know, when it's fluid, so there is some you know, leeway for organizations to take action. So what, you know, would be you know, your starting point? Where would you advise organizations to start in changing their culture towards psychological safety? Yeah.
First thing is make the decision to do it, right? But to really do it, not just kind of do it on a superficial level, right? So decide that you're going to do it. They then need to understand what's going on. So you need to pinpoint the root causes. It's no good just going in for the symptoms, right? Because what you're just going to stick a plaster over it and it's going to keep coming back, right? You need to pinpoint those root causes. So here's how we do it. And there's loads of different ways of doing it, but this is how we do it, right? So we engage with organizations through our culture program, and we start with diagnostics. Then we choose appropriate interventions based on what those diagnostics tell us, and then we deliver those interventions. So let me give you a bit more detail into what that involves, so people can kind of get a gauge of the kind of activities that they might want to engage in. So our culture diagnostic phase is the first phase, and it typically includes some time with an organization to understand their current culture, their psychological safety landscape, all of that good stuff. We assess their culture using our culture framework, and that usually involves a few days on site, or if we've got remote businesses, we do it virtually. We typically involve things like workshops with the leadership team. We might attend meetings, we do observations, we conduct one-to-ones with selected individuals. Basically, we're gathering as much information as we can on what is going on within the organization. We also roll out our diagnostic tool, which is called Lux. We developed it in collaboration with the University of Cambridge. And we roll that out to gain data-driven insights, because organizations, they want data. They want to see the data behind it, right? So we roll that out to get some robust ideas of what's actually going on, as well as all of the other stuff that we've gained through the observations and stuff. Now, we have got a partnership with Cambridge University, an ongoing partnership. So if an organization wants it, if it's big enough, if it's got the capacity for it, we bring them in to deliver lots more insights on wider range of topics that we can't cover. So things like DE&I, you know, much wider kind of stuff that we don't tend to focus in on. So we can get other data as well, should they want it. So once we've done that diagnostic kind of element to it, we then present our findings back with a tailored proposal for any ongoing interventions that we think that they need to take. So that then leads into our next phase, which is our culture intensive. So these are basically our interventions, those things that we've identified within the diagnostic phase that are tailored to the specific needs of the organization. And that could include one of many different things, such as, let's say, company-wide training. It might be leadership workshops. It might be e-learning, toolkit resources, that kind of stuff, executive coaching, We also do a champions program and a train the trainer program. So it can look, it can manifest in a few different ways, really, but we identify what is important to them. And then once we've delivered all of the interventions, we don't just walk out. We don't just go, right, we're done, bye. You know, we offer what we call culture maintenance, which is our ongoing support. And that might include regular check-ins, one-to-one coaching, consultancy, workshops and training refreshers, that kind of stuff, assessments, pulse checks, all of those kind of good things. So that's the process that we go through. And I said other people would probably go through different things. But in terms of where you can start, if you've got an issue, gather information, okay? Find out what the issues are, identify the root causes, and then tailor your interventions from there. Don't just go scattergun and try lots of different things without knowing what the issues actually are. You're just going to waste your time, your energy, your money. There's no point in doing that.
Thanks, Gina. You started your answer with this, you know, take a decision on changing your culture. And you also said that it's not only, I mean, many people see the responsibility for psychological safety as a leadership issue. So there is this take a decision. So how would you characterize the responsibility of leaders, and what kind of leadership interventions are necessary, you know, to create such a culture?
Yeah, brilliant question. In terms of leadership do have a role to play in creating a psychologically safe environment. Okay, so every individual plays their own part within building that culture. Okay, but leaders have additional responsibilities. So, you know, things like, you know, they've got to make sure that they are taking on board policies, procedures, all of that kind of stuff, all of the overarching organizational level things they have a responsibility for. Okay, so they do have a responsibility. But in terms of leadership interventions that might be necessary, so this is different for every single organization that we work with. It might include training, workshops, exec coaching, our leadership toolkit, etc. So we roll out those, we roll these out after the diagnostic phase. So after we've rolled out Lux, the diagnostic tool, after we've assessed the organizational culture using our culture framework, this is when this comes in. Now, in terms of popular areas of focus for leaders, again, this varies, but I can give you an idea of topics that we've delivered recently. And this is usually through like workshops or training interventions, might be a bit of one-to-one stuff as well. So things like leadership effectiveness. So this would involve practical strategies for leading teams, ensuring strong communication, clear expectations, consistent engagement, that kind of thing. We'd touch upon things like managing team dynamics. So helping managers to understand diverse personalities, work styles, communication preferences, and then navigating and leveraging these to enable everyone to contribute effectively within that team environment. That's really important. Other things are things like creating psychologically safe spaces. So how do you create a space where people can feel comfortable and confident to bring their authentic self, to encourage creativity, encourage reflection? That kind of stuff is really important. We might touch upon things like, how do you navigate power dynamics now? Okay, so power dynamics plays a huge role in how safe people feel. How do we navigate that? And how do you make sure that you clarify different roles to reduce ambiguity? Things like setting clear boundaries and managing expectations comes up quite a bit as well. How do we deliver feedback effectively? How do we develop a reflective practice culture? It's really important. But also things like remote leadership has been prominent in the most recent years. You've got a remote team. How can you manage that remote team in the same way that you would in a face-to-face team with the limitations that you've got? Another key one that's coming up quite a bit recently as well is neurodiversity awareness. So if you've got people who are neurodiverse in your team, how can you understand and appreciate the different work styles, preferences, communication needs, all of that good stuff to ensure everyone can contribute their best work? So that's just a flavour of the kind of stuff that we deliver in terms of workshops, training, coaching, sort of stuff. It's really important,
Yeah, thanks. I also really like this power dynamics part, because I think it's really crucial for psychological safety, but you know, organizations in a broader sense. And this brings me to the question of the role of employees, and also to our listeners. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So we are happy to take up questions. When we come to the role of employees, you said that it starts with the I. So what challenges do employees face in such a change process? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of things that can come up, and it's a very individualized experience. As I said at the beginning, psychological safety is a subjective experience. So I might walk into a situation and feel totally comfortable. You, Alex, might walk into the situation, exact same people, and feel very unsafe for whatever reason. So we've got to keep that in mind. But in terms of employees, I mean, some of the key challenges are things like not being able to bring their authentic self to work, and then the issues that brings up. They might have communication issues. Again, navigating different personalities, different work preferences. That comes up so much, actually. It's one of the biggest things, I would say, that we're dealing with at the moment. But then what if the culture is toxic, right? And they're dealing with ineffective leadership, toxic or negative behaviors, ineffective communication. You've got all this going on. What do you do then? Like, how do you deal with that? Well, this is where emotional intelligence and resilience is key. So we make sure that we equip employees with emotional intelligence and resilience to make sure that they can navigate those challenges, navigate those negative behaviors that they might be coming across on a day-to-day basis, and be able to work effectively within diverse teams. So emotional intelligence is really key. Other key things that they come across are things like their boundaries are being crossed. And that's usually because they haven't set them for themselves, they haven't expressed them, and then people aren't respecting those boundaries. So there's always a bit of a thing around boundaries and expectations. We tend to get issues around receiving and responding to feedback. So especially with this speak up culture, right, there's this whole idea of we should be making sure everybody gets feedback, but then we don't train people on how to give feedback and how to receive it. So then there's this whole interplay of we've got somebody that's giving feedback, it's landed inappropriately for whatever reason, and then this causes conflict. So how do we unpick that? We have that kind of situation and scenario that's going on quite a lot at the moment, actually. So really important point there is don't just roll out, let's give people feedback. Make sure you're equipping people with the relevant skills and knowledge to be able to do that, because otherwise you're going to create a more toxic culture and environment for people. Last couple of things, I guess, really that are coming up quite frequently are things like conflict resolution. People don't have the skills and the ability to deal with conflict resolution. Some people and personalities shy away from it. They just don't like it. But then it's recognizing how to deal with that, okay? Because that happens quite a lot. Some people love conflict, other people don't. How do you navigate that? That's the kind of key thing that employees are dealing with. And the last thing I want to mention, which is quite fundamental, I think, but often overlooked, is bridging this intergenerational and cultural gap, right? So we've got a workforce, like in any generation, I guess, really, where we've got an older generation and then we've got the young generation. And then they're coming together and there's a lot of conflict because they don't understand each other. They don't know how to communicate. They've got different expectations. So how do we bridge those gaps and bring those people together so they can work together in a healthy way? That is causing quite a lot of issues with, especially larger organizations, I'm finding at the moment. So just
Thanks,
a flavour.
Gina.
Quite a lot there.
Quite a lot there. Thanks, Gina. Many questions popped up as you spoke. I will keep in mind, there's one in the Q&A section that's asking, Gina, for your thoughts on how to promote a safer space from within an organization if you think that leadership are not on board, or if leadership itself is part of the problem or the key issue in creating such an environment.
Yeah, thank you for that really important question, David, right? Okay, let me address that. We get a lot of organizations coming to us with this exact situation, okay? So typically it could be that the leadership team are part of the issue. And it's a very sensitive situation, I can tell you. So yeah, in terms of how we deal with it is pretty similar to every organization that we come across. We take them through that process first, so we find out what the issues are. And if it flags up that they are part of the issue, we try to get as much data-driven insights as possible rather than just people's subjective experience. So we want to see the hard data for it as well. We don't just want kind of hearsay, if you like. So once we've got all that data, we then present it back. Okay, so we present it back to typically the leadership team. Now, the leadership team want very different things to what an employee would want. They want to see the evidence. They want to know what the return on investment is going to be. They want to know how those changes that we're proposing are going to make a difference to them in their day-to-day working life. So typically the first part of call for us is educating the leadership team. So what is this work that we're doing? Why are we doing it? Why is it important? And why do you need to focus on this? Okay, that's the first kind of conversation that we have. And we do that very early on in the process, because if we don't have leadership on board, this is all going to fail, okay? Because we need to have as many people on board as possible. And if it's not coming, if the messaging isn't coming from the leadership team in a robust way, then yes, it is inevitably going to fail. People are not going to believe in it. So we have to get the buy-in from the leadership team. And that is typically an educational thing, right? Once we've gone through this is why it's important, these are the insights that we've got from your organization, people are telling us this stuff. Once we present that back, they kind of go, okay, right, I'm seeing this differently now. And that is typically what it takes to get the leadership team on board. However, we will get some people who are just like, actually, no, I'm not into this. I don't get it. I don't see that it's important. And typically, there could be a few different things going on here. One of these things could be that they might have a toxic personality, so a personality disorder, okay? So this isn't that they're showing negative behaviors. This is that they have an actual personality disorder. If that is the case, then it doesn't matter what we say. It's never going to land well. And that's a totally different issue. And we can deal with that, but it's a very different conversation to the rest of the culture work. So we might have that situation. We might have also somebody who's coming towards the end of the career. They're ready to bow out, they're ready to leave, and they're just kind of seeing out their last days. They're not really buying into it. And actually, this could be the perfect opportunity for that culture change work to take place and for them to move on, to bring somebody in to replace them, to take on the culture work. So yeah, brilliant question, David. It's so nuanced that I can't give it justice in a few minutes, but hopefully that gave you a flavour of the work that we would do to address that.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. The second question that popped up while you spoke was, you spoke about, personality traits and, having like personality disorder or something similar. So the main title of your book is The Authentic Organization. So do you think there is a trade-off between authenticity and psychological safety, in the sense of, I'm authentic by being mean or by being nasty? So yeah, do these things pop up in a sense of, are there steps? Can you be authentic and psychologically safe at the same time? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is so nuanced, isn't it? When it comes to authenticity, right, people tend to think it's something different to what it actually is. So our definition of authenticity is, I want you to imagine for me how you're showing up now at work. I'm trying to simplify it in my head because I usually give a much longer explanation to this, but for the purpose of time, I'll simplify it, right? So I want you to imagine how you're showing up at work right now. You're showing up as your identity, okay? So your identity is basically a perception of who you are. It's not who you really are, it's a perception of who you are. And that perception that people are getting is based on all of your life experiences. So the things that have happened to you in the past, it's things like your personality, it's your work styles, it's your culture, it's religion, it's made up of so many different aspects as your identity. But that's how you show up, and that's what people see of you in the workplace. Authenticity and your authentic self, however, is who you really are. It's like the genuine nature of who you are. So imagine this for me. Let me give you a scenario. So imagine that you are going on vacation, so you've booked a holiday. The first few days, you tend to still be in kind of work mode, right? So you're there, you're present with your family or your friends, whoever you're with, but actually you're not really relaxed. Okay, you're still showing up as that persona that you've been giving out to people for such a long time. However, as the holiday goes on and you get towards the end of your holiday, typically, you start to relax, don't you? And you start to feel more of your true self. Like you're grounded, you're more relaxed, you're more peaceful, you're a bit more joyful, you're probably enjoying the stuff that you're doing. That essence there that you're feeling, that to me is your authentic self. And that's what we want to bring into the workplace, right? But that is getting hidden by all this other stuff, right? All this baggage that that you've collected over the years. You take it all in to the workplace with you. And when we talk about bringing your authentic self to work, what we're saying there is, if you feel safe and comfortable in a situation with the particular people that you're with, it's about showing more of that authentic self to those people. Okay, so that might, there's a lot of work involved in that from an individual perspective, and this is where the self-awareness bit comes in, right? So to do that, you need to start unpicking all of those negative experiences, all those things that are impacting on you in a negative way in the workplace. You start to unpick some of those things, and that's when you can start to truly show up as your authentic self. So your question initially, Alex, there was around this idea of authenticity and psychological safety. Yeah. Right? Can they exist together? Yes, they can, and they have to, right? So for a truly psychologically safe environment, an organization, and workplace, you need to feel safe, right? And to feel you're only going to feel safe when you are able to express your authentic self in those situations. If you're bringing in your identity into those situations, chances are you don't feel truly safe. There's something that is stopping you from feeling that level of joy and creativity and all of that good stuff that you feel on holiday, right?
Yeah.
You need that authenticity to be there for you to feel psychologically safe, and vice versa. You know, you've got to feel safe to bring your authentic self to work. It's all intertwined.
Yeah. In your answer, you mentioned the concept of self-awareness, and also in your book you write on self-awareness. So what can leaders and employees do to develop greater self-awareness?
Yeah, it's crucial. It really is. So the first thing is to raise your awareness, right? So, and we do that through targeted reflection. So this is basically where we're trying to unpick all of those negative behaviors that are impacting on you. Some of the things that have happened to you in the past are going to be useful to you right now, but we're particularly focusing on those ones that are not very useful to you, right? So that's where we're focusing. So the first thing is to raise your awareness through that targeted reflection. And to bring your authentic self to work, we take individuals and teams through pillar 1 of our 5 pillars of psychological safety. So pillar 1 is self, right? Focuses on empowering individuals to thrive in the workplace by cultivating intrapersonal awareness. So awareness of your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, that kind of stuff. Now, this lays the groundwork for individuals to bring their authentic self to work. The methodology that we use for pillar 1 is the authentic self process. And this is all detailed in the book. I go through in so much detail in the book, but I'll give you a flavor here today. So there are 3 dimensions associated with this pillar where we ask individuals 3 questions. The first is, what affects my performance and behavior at work? So raising your awareness of what those things are. The second stage is, now I know what those things are, how can I take back control of those things that are affecting my performance and behavior at work? So what can I do, right? And then the third thing is, what can I do to achieve my personal and professional goals at work? So this is typically where you start to reconnect to your authentic self and to bringing those aspects into your work. So if you're wanting to start the process of reconnecting to your authentic self, you need to start by peeling back the layers that have accumulated over time, those layers that are protecting the real version of you, if you like. This involves targeted self-reflection, releasing anything that negatively impacts your performance and behavior in the workplace, and having the courage to present your authentic self. and practicing consistency in being your authentic self across different contexts and situations. So a starting point is asking yourself that first question: what affects my performance and behavior at work? And really thinking that through. One other thing that you can consider is this, right? So a very practical thing that you can do now. So if you find a comfortable space to express your authentic self with, I don't know, specific individuals, for instance, within the organization, it's worth exploring. So imagine that you're in a situation where you do feel safe to bring certain elements of your authentic self to that conversation, right? The first thing to do is identify what those situations and people are where you do feel safe. There are going to be certain situations where you do and certain situations where you don't, and you present a censored version of yourself. You hide behind a mask, in essence. So identify what those situations and people are where you do feel safe. Define your boundaries, both personal and work. So what do you feel comfortable talking about in those situations? Once you've defined those, assess the situations where you already feel safe, the ones that you've identified, and think, what do I feel safe sharing with this person and in this situation that I don't currently share with them? So what do I actually feel safe extra sharing with this person? And then gradually contribute more while staying within your boundaries. That's really important. Now, this process creates a ripple effect, much like a pebble in water. So as you open up, those around you start to notice, and they realize it's a safe space for them to do so as well. So by signaling your comfort, a sense of safety will naturally spread, enhancing authenticity throughout the workplace. It does take a bit of time, but it is noticeable. So that's the first thing, self-awareness. The second thing you consider is, I mentioned earlier about resilience and emotional intelligence training, workshops, that kind of stuff. So really thinking about, how do you navigate challenging situations? And if you have an interaction with someone that is exhibiting negative behaviors towards you, what can you do to reduce the impact that it has on you? Because people take issues home with them. We did a global survey on this within the Institute, and we asked a question about how much does it impact you? Do you take it home with you? Does it impact on your home life? Does it impact on your mental health? That kind of stuff. And the results were astonishing. I can't remember the percentages now, but we have them on our website. But yeah, I remember getting those results and thinking, wow, like it was around like 90% or something of people taking their issues home with them, and then it negatively impacting on everything that's happening at home. So yeah, being your authentic self is important in the workplace, but also it's important in other aspects of your life as well. We don't operate in silos. All of this stuff is intertwined.
Not operating in silos and bringing stuff home brings me to the question of times of crisis. Many say that we live in a time of multiple crises, and many organizations need to change. Also, with AI rising and reskilling and upskilling their employees. So, what role does authenticity and psychological safety play in times of turbulence and crisis?
So this is an interesting one, right? So in times of change or crisis, whatever's going on, maintaining psychological safety within the organization is crucial. However, the issue is, if you don't have psychological safety in your organization before the change or crisis happens, right? So venturing into these periods without a solid foundation of psychological safety risks cultivating a toxic culture. And then that leads to increased resistance, miscommunication, conflicts, etc. It kind of spirals. So you need to build this foundation before anything happens to navigate change effectively. If you start to try and build in psychological safety when you're going through change or crisis, it's so difficult because people are triggered already. So to create that safety is much harder. So you've got to do it beforehand. So how do you establish this foundation in the first instance? You're going to ask me that, aren't you? I know you're going to ask me.
Yeah.
Right. So let me talk that through, because I think that'd be really useful for our listeners. Okay, so to create a psychologically safe workplace, you need to start by identifying and addressing areas of toxicity across the 5 levels of culture. Now, I've mentioned these a few times and I haven't gone into detail, so let's look at those now to kind of give you some ideas of what that involves. So this is our we call it the PSI culture framework, and there's 5 levels of culture that are in an organization. So the first level is personal culture. So this is the core of individual beliefs, values, and behaviors that shape each employee's contribution to the workplace. So we focus here on developing emotional intelligence, self-awareness, authenticity, personal accountability, motivation, work ethic, resilience, effective coping mechanisms, that kind of stuff, all the stuff related to an individual. So that's level 1, personal culture. Level 2 is the one-to-one culture. So this level relates to those direct interactions between individuals, such as manager-employee relationships or peer-to-peer interactions. So this is the one where we look at cultivating effective communication skills, trust, feedback mechanisms, conflict resolution approaches, that kind of stuff. Level 3 is team culture. So this one involves the dynamics, interactions, and norms within specific teams or work groups. Promoting cohesion, shared goals, role clarity, inclusivity, collaboration. These are all really important aspects of team culture. Level 4 is collaboration culture. So at this level, the focus shifts to those interactions and collaborations among different departments or teams. So we're emphasizing here those strong interdepartmental relations, cooperation, transparency, knowledge sharing across the organization, collaborative problem solving, and making collective decisions. Okay, so that's collaboration culture. Lastly, we've got level 5, which is the organizational culture. So this is the highest level. It encompasses overarching values, norms, policies, practices that define the workplace environment. It's shaped by leadership styles, organizational structure and systems, communication channels, reward systems, alignment of values with strategic goals. All of that kind of stuff comes in to play into level 5. So earlier I mentioned that there's not just one level of culture, there's 5. They are the 5 levels that I was talking about. Okay, so going back to your question around how do we create psychological safety? So we start off by identifying and addressing the areas of toxicity across those 5 levels. So we find out where those issues are, and that's where our diagnostic tool comes in, and that's what we're doing in the diagnostic phase of the work that we do with organization. We're delving into each of those 5, figuring out what's going on and what's toxic in those areas. So then we've identified those toxic hotspots. That's what we like to call them, toxic hotspots in those 5 culture areas. Now what? So to effectively address those areas of toxicity, you need to implement a comprehensive and targeted approach. Now, I already mentioned our process for this. It's about diagnosing the root causes and then designing those targeted interventions. And that's going to be different for every single organization. You know, some organizations might need to focus in on the leadership. Imagine you've got somebody that is a toxic leader, for instance. They've got a toxic personality that's showing up in the workplace. It's influencing everything. We might need to focus in on the leadership aspects. Another organization might be really struggling with team dynamics or communication. Others might have a mixture going on. So the key thing is identifying those root causes, designing those interventions based on that, and then proactively addressing those toxic hotspots. It's essential to create that healthy and resilient workplace culture. And then once we've got that healthy workplace culture established, we know what the issues are, we've started trying to deal with some of those things, maintaining psychological safety during those periods of change becomes more manageable because you've got that strong foundation in place already, right? Everybody knows the lay of the land, you know, they know that you've already started to implement this idea of authenticity and this idea of psychological safety. And then when change happens, you've got that firm footing. So the key to navigating those periods of change is to have psychological safety firmly in place beforehand, because without it, even the simplest changes can cause significant disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing also this again very comprehensive approach that is even more comprehensive in the book. But thanks for giving us an overview and the flavor of your approach. We have a couple of minutes left again for our listeners and viewers. feel free to ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat. Coming to the end of our book club discussion, I mean, there's a lot to do, but you know, yeah, can you really boil it down to one actionable step that leaders should do? One, or like the yeah.
Yes, yeah. I guess, you know, I've reflected on this, right? Like you said, the book is absolutely jam-packed with stuff, and if you think I've blown your mind today, wait till you read the book, right? Yeah, I guess the key thing is that change starts with you. Okay, you are a role model in everything that you do. People are watching you, they're listening to you, whether you know it or not. You are a role model to the people around you. So being your authentic self, psychological safety, creating a healthy workplace environment, these all start with you. And we've got to remember that individuals make up a collective. So I mentioned earlier that culture is fluid. It can change, it can morph, it can change within seconds. Okay, individuals make up that collective workplace, collective environment, collective culture. So if you want to change the culture, if you want to change what's happening, start with you. And I'd also add here to take responsibility for your own personal experience in the workplace. So be mindful of your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors, and understand how they affect your communication and interactions with others. We all have the right to feel safe at work. It's one of my key things. We do have the right to feel safe at work, and it's within your power to create that environment. I guess that's what I would like to leave you with today.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. One question that popped up. I mean, when people, organizations approach you, is it normally leadership that approaches you, or some people, you know, like, yeah, say, okay, we would need this training. Can you please come? We would
Ring
need
me.
this training. Yeah.
Well, listen, it comes from different avenues, right? So yeah, we do get some conversations from leaders. So it might be, for instance, that they might be having an issue with the leadership team, and one of the leaders has kind of stepped out of that to recognize that they need to do some work. So yeah, we'd engage with leaders. We'd also engage with HR. We might engage with ED&I professionals. It might even be an employee resource group lead that reaches out to us. And so typically, I mean, there's a few different routes that we go down in terms of working with organizations. And one is the culture program. So if you know you need to do a big piece of work, that's what we would take you through. Other organizations simply want an introduction to it. So typically that's where the ERG, the employee resource group leads, come in to us. They say, we're organizing an event for whatever point in the calendar. Could you come in and talk to us about psychological safety, or about being your authentic self at work, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we get a mixture of different people. It could be culture change, people responsible for culture change in an organization. It could be organizational development. It might be learning and development team. Literally, it comes from everywhere. And it just depends on what your issue is that you're facing as to why you're reaching out. And that's where we start. We always start with the individual. Tell us what's going on. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot. We are almost done with our time. There's one comment in the chat. Thanks for the session, and also for the sentence change starts with you. I mean, this is something that we can take home, at least to make our organizations and our workplaces a better place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alex,
Gina,
for your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Gina, for this lovely presentation. You know, you wrapped it up perfectly, and you gave us really good insight into the book and what leaders and what employees can do. And last but not least, that it really starts with you, with us, to drive change. So thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
We say goodbye. Yes. Thanks also for your attendance, all people on Zoom and on LinkedIn. Yeah, and see you at the next book club from IND. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.